The arcade era is over. I'm not happy saying that. Arcades are the source of my favorite games of all time, and I think what they've contributed to game design historically has been underrated and invaluable. But as it currently stands right now, they're just no longer an economic reality. You can't make serious, dedicated games to come out in the arcade and reach a new audience and expand and grow. Yes, you can have some very specialized circumstances, but as a whole, arcades can no longer be the basis of a genre, especially a genre that is fundamentally tied to their design, such as bullet hell shmups. And so, what becomes of the bullet hell shmup now that it can no longer come out in arcades? Well, I think there are three different paths that I've seen the genre take recently, and I'm not a fan of two of them, and one of them is really rare, but I think hopefully will grow into what we see in the future. So the first path is simply you take the concept and aesthetics and trappings of bullet hell shmups, and then you dilute them down and spread them across more popular mainstream genres that sort of pay lip service to bullet hells and shmups. There are a lot of examples of this, Signy being a very unfortunate recent one, but essentially you just dilute away the fundamentals but keep the aesthetics and the concept that people can be like, wow, it's like a shmup. It's like a shmup, right? So that's one path that we're going to continually see. Raiden is doing this as well. The second path is a little bit less ugly, but I think it's a dead end, where you have developers hearkening back to shmups and arcade games and console shmups, but in a more nostalgic, remember when sort of status, where you're invoking the past, you're invoking, hey, remember when shmups were cool? But it's kind of a novelty and a dead end. Like, there's nowhere to go from here. It just takes shmups and sort of puts them in a museum and go, remember when these were cool? But putting them under glass, so to say. And we see a lot of stuff like that coming out now. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just not really going to go anywhere, I don't think. And then we have the third path, the most difficult path, and I think the path that you have to be kind of a visionary to go down right now, and there are some examples of this, but they're very rare, which are developers who are taking the fundamental concepts and principles and meta of the arcade environment, and they are transforming and building upon it in the new PC, console, online environment, and trying to push beyond what the arcades could do into a whole new surge of game design. And this is a very difficult path to go down because there aren't really established routes yet. There aren't established examples you can look to and say, well, this game did it perfectly. You know, you're on the bleeding edge here, the cutting edge of what the genre's design is, because a lot of developers are still just trying to catch up with the arcade, and just making something that is worthy of being in the arcade is enough of a task. And so what's really special and what's really exciting is I think Blue Revolver Double Action is one of these rare examples, and it's going to be a game I will see myself constantly referring to in the future, because that is exactly what Danbo did. He took a game 8 years ago when it came out that was more made for, okay, this is supposed to stand alongside arcade games, and it was very successful at that. And in fact, I remember interviewing a Ketsui super player from Japan 6 years ago, and he confirmed, yes, the Japanese arcade super players approve of Blue Revolver. It is worthy of the title of bullet hell shmup alongside Cave and the greats within the genre. And that was a massive milestone, I think. But since that point, the most important port of all time was released, which was Battle Garega Revision 2016, and that release was a thesis statement by an extremely talented development team, which the whole concept was to take this all-time classic, one of the greatest shmups of all time, Battle Garega, and enhance it and future-proof it beyond the arcade. That was the whole concept, because M2 knew, hey, arcades are going away. These super players need something to play. They need a way to continue to interact with this game without the arcade. And that was the concept and motivation behind Revision 2016, pushing beyond the arcade. And since that point, they have continued to release extremely quality ports that I highly recommend. but they've kind of just been out on an island by themselves in terms of quality. No one has really responded to what they've been up to and caught up with them until now. If I could describe Double Action in a nutshell, it's basically Danbo taking his already arcade quality game and then doing his own M2 Shot Triggers port of his own game and releasing it on PC. That is the leap forward in quality between original Blue Revolver and Double Action. It's crazy in terms of economics that this is a free update, but in terms of the artistic design of the game, in terms of the quality of the game, I couldn't have asked for something better. I was actually quite shocked as I was playing the game how much of a leap forward it is and how it's doing a lot of things that I've been talking about. Oh, Shmup should do this. But then actually seeing them done, it's amazing. It's a real visionary step that we have not seen any other indie shmup developer do. Danbo really put himself out here on a limb, and over all these years working on this update, refining the game, even I was like, I don't know, this is a little much, right? This is a little crazy, but the results speak for themselves. I've been blown away. This is a massive leap forward for not only the game, but I think potentially the genre, where if people pay attention to what Blue Revolver Double Action is doing and start to implement and build on its ideas, I think that is going to be the next true wave of shmup design. We can't just continue to make shmups for an environment that no longer exists. You've got to push the genre into the future, and I think the Blue Revolver Double Action vision of what that future looks like is the correct one, at least the one that I highly agree with. Take what is good about shmups and just
push it further.
And a lot of that is really technical, it's nuanced, it's a ton of nitty-gritty little details stacking on top of each other for a fantastic polish and overall effect. And Danbo himself in the note says he's pushing for elegance, which is what the genre should be pushing for, but it's not sexy. It's not super marketable. It's not the type of thing, oh, I'm making a shmup with 4,000 levels or some kind of really big gimmick. And then game journalists write about, oh, it's reinventing the genre. It's shifting the genre. The really frustrating thing about shmups is the games that reinvent the genre, that redefine the genre, that push the genre forward are not the ones that get attention because it's not this big, flashy, sexy process. Shmups are one of the most defined, well-developed genres of all time. And so if you come up with something that meaningfully adds to the design of the genre, it's not going to be some big, sexy inversion or some massive statement. It's going to be a lot of really smart, nuanced ideas that just push the genre oh so gently forward. And Blue Revolver Double Action is putting some ideas forward that now that I've played them in a shmup, it's going to be really hard playing other shmups coming out in the future and not saying, hey, they should add this feature from Double Action. Oh, this feature from Double Action would be a good idea. Oh, maybe you should consider looking at what Double Action did. And that is what innovation actually looks like. It's when you set a new standard that everything else coming out needs to respond to or should respond to make their game better. And so with all of this set up, before we get into the improvements and additions of Double Action, I think it's important to revisit the original game really quickly. And so the original version of Blue Revolver came out 8 years ago, and that version of the game was very important because it was one of the very first Western-made shmups to break the Euroshmup curse. Because as I've said before on this channel, Euroshmups isn't actually about the origin of the game's design. Japanese developers could make a Euroshmup. Certainly American developers can make Euroshmups. It's more about a philosophy of design that misunderstands or doesn't fully develop the fundamentals of what makes shmups good. And Danbo was one of the very first Western developers in the indie scene to understand, how do you make a fundamentally strong bullet hell? How does the West respond to these Japanese arcade games that we love so much? And so it was a great release on that basis, and its systems and overall approach were just polished and fantastic. The things about Blue Revolver as a game that stand out to me as just excellent are, one, its scoring system The Blue Revolver scoring system is addictively fun and delightfully ambiguous. That's how I would describe it. It's addictively fun because it's so straightforward and simple as a concept. You build this little 8 chain with your default shot, and then you cash out the chain with your special weapon. And there's multiple ships with multiple special weapons, and you can get a ton of playstyle and variety just based off of that alone. But then on top of that, it's not totally clear what the best route is until you sit down and really study. And I'm sure even now, super players are still building upon and developing their routes for the game. And it's a game that's really successful at getting you to play for score very early. I didn't really appreciate that as much as I do now playing Double Action, but yeah, it's a game that's very good at making you think about score. And another reason for that is the really well-developed rank system of Blue Revolver. It's like a nice little bite-sized version of Grega, but not as crazy and extreme, where you play for rank and score together, because the more you score, the more extends you get. But the more you score, the more you build your rank. So you have that whole dynamic that Grega has of scoring to build extends to build rank. And you can even suicide your ships for more special weapons, just like Grega, which I'm sure factors into the high-level scoring. But the thing that separates Blue Revolver from Grega and keeps it more reasonable and beginner-friendly is that the rank caps out much earlier in Blue Revolver. When you get to level 5, it's capped out, and that's reasonable, which makes Blue Revolver's Hyper Mode one of the best scoring systems for newer and intermediate players. And then there's the game's Parallel Mode, which is very interesting because it locks the game's rank to 5, so you're playing higher difficulty at all times statically, but it still retains the ability to gain extends via score and sacrifice lives to gain special weapons. And so it creates this cool dynamic where even if you are just playing for the 1cc, as I often do, you are still incentivized to look into scoring because you get the extra extends. And then if you are actually playing for score and going for top level scores, you're still going to be suiciding your ship to get the extra special weapons. So you're still going to be using those extends to gain score. It reminds me a lot of the Destiny range of Ketsui in a really cool way. And then complementing that is the game's break system. This is some really cool dynamic optional difficulty where if you feel like getting more score, what you can do is strategically break apart the parts of the bosses and mid-bosses for scoring bonuses. It makes the boss fights more dynamic, and you have stuff like this in cave games, but I like how formalized it is in Blue Revolver. I like that it's an actual mechanic that the game points out to you and says, hey, did you get the boss break or not? So that even if you're not paying attention to the scoring system, you're not paying attention to the break system, the game still constantly puts this system in your face in the end of the screen, on screen. It's just constantly shoving you in the face. Hey, why aren't you breaking stuff? You should be breaking stuff. And that's the type of design I think the genre needs. Developers need to be aggressively communicating the meta of their game to the player rather than obscuring it or hiding it or making it a secret, because these days, if you don't directly communicate what the game wants you to do, players aren't going to care to look into it. There's such a wave and ocean of stuff coming out now, and so much obscurity and unfamiliarity with the genre. Anyway, the idea is to formalize the meta of how the game is played and then put it directly into its design. The developer should acknowledge the player's goals and skills rather than just leaving it open-ended and ambiguous. That is the future, and I think Danbo, both in the original version and especially in Double Action, has really done a fantastic job of showing this concept in action. And so now let's get into the additions and updates that makes Double Action amazing. And so first of all, frame rates. That's right, frame rates. Danbo actually went in and added a high frame rate mode to Blue Revolver. God knows how much time and effort it was to get this to function, but the results are incredible. It's something I've always wondered, especially after playing Devil Daggers and its high frame rates. I've always thought, what would it be like to play a really well-made bullet hell shmup in 120 FPS? Well, now you can find out, and once you find out, there's just no going back. I can't play 60 FPS Blue Revolver anymore now that I've experienced this high frame rate mode, and it's something that the genre needs to do. I know it's a lot of time and effort and work, but the 60 FPS standard is fading, and it's fading very quickly. And as much as I love the arcade genres of fighting games and shmups, and them being locked to 60 FPS has been a tradition, we're moving past the arcade tradition. We're moving into the future. High frame rate modes are incredible, and I'm sure it's more doable than people think if you just have both options in there. So if you want people to play on CRTs at 60 FPS, it's in there. But for the people playing on high frame rate gaming monitors, ignoring this technology is being stuck in the past for no real benefit. Also, most people that I meet these days and most arcades that I visit these days do not actually use CRT monitors anyway. A lot of people in their home cabinet setups now have high frame rate gaming monitors. CRTs, I love them, and I think it's great to have features for them, but we also need to address the 99% of technology out there as a genre. High frame rate is where it's at, especially because its benefit is immediately good. So that addition alone, I think, puts Double Action in its own special category, but Double Action is doing a lot more than that. The other thing that I really like that Danbo added in is he brought in the gadget system from Revision 2016, and it's a great idea. I think this should be the new standard. As Picasso says, great artists steal. This is the case of what he means. These great concepts that would transfer across games, like these gadget systems, these ways to visually convey the game's design to you immediately and help you track rank and scoring and weapon stats. It's a fantastic idea. And then the next thing that Double Action does is introduce a new character and shot type, D, the wide shot, but also goes back in and revamps the ship system to make each individual ship more distinctive. I very much agree with this direction to take the game, because the problem with the original version of Blue Revolver, single action, I guess we can call it, is that it had two different characters, Val and Mai, but then you had three different option selects for Val and Mai, and then you had all their different weapon selections. And so it ended up being a very ambiguous sort of mishmash. I felt like where going back in and removing that option select, I think was a great idea, because now the characters are more distinctive. Now you have actual built-in styles between Val, Mai, and D. I like consolidating it down. It's not always best to just have as many options as possible when you're designing characters, because then they lose identity. Restriction in characters is part of their design just as much as their options. So I thought this was a great direction to go in. But then Danbo also has another layer that I really like, where yes, you don't have the option selection anymore, but you have the perk system now. And it makes the weapon types a lot more distinctive, because not only are you having different weapons, but then you get a perk along with the weapon. So now when I play Hyper Laser Mai, that feels like a very distinct experience from playing Laser Val. And then with the overall balance, I can't catalog all of the changes made between single action and double action. Danbo has this massive post you can go through and see, but the big one that stands out to me, like the shining beacon, is his revamp of level 5. I thought level 5 was always kind of the weakest part of single action. Not that it wasn't good, but it wasn't as epic and climactic as you get in like Cave level 5. Think of DOJ level 5, Katsui level 5, just these big gauntlets and journey. And I think Double Action does a better job at this. He went back in. He definitely added in this back-scrolling section, which straight up Ketsui vibes there. But I also noticed the final boss was revamped, and I love the new patterns a lot more. They feel more dynamic and challenging. And one of my favorite ones is the ball that falls downward. That reminds me so much of the final pattern in Silvergun in a really cool way. And the game overall feels more balanced and polished, but it's not one distinctive thing. That's what makes it actually more impressive. It's just the sum total of all of these gradual shifts and changes, and just night after night, I am sure, year after year, Danbo just like, all right, let's improve this bit here and this bit here. So zoomed in, it's hard to point to one exact thing that makes the change, but when you zoom out and just feel the overall effect of the game as you're playing it, it is a massive leap forward. It feels now like a much stronger, more polished release that will last into the future and will endure in a way that I didn't expect. I thought Blue Revolver Double Action would be a fun little update with some nice changes. I was really looking forward to the frame rate stuff, but I wasn't prepared for just the overall combined level of polish that can really only come from time, both in the game and out of it. And what I mean by out of the game is the structure of Double Action, some of the meta features he's added to the game that I think, again, should be standards moving forward, because they feel like small details, but their actual effect, I think, is very important. So the first thing I'm talking about is now when you go in and you're choosing your character, down at the bottom, Danbo has this in-game achievement medal system where for each difficulty and ship type and weapon type, he has put in a specific goal. So when you first play Hyper My Laser, it says down at the bottom, clear the game. But then once you clear the game on Hyper My Laser, then down at the bottom, and now it has a new goal, which is clear the game with this score. That seems like a small detail, but one of the key missing ingredients to modern shmups being made now is they do not integrate the scoring formally into the design. That is so important. And I like this medal system because now it's a way for Danbo to directly communicate to you, the player, what he considers a good score. Because a problem that comes up with scoring meta in shmups is usually you have this giant rift between the average player and the super players. I know, because I'm always standing in between that rift on the average player side, like, oh, I see you over there, Jamers. I see you, and I'm kind of near the edge, but there's this giant hole between us in scoring. And why this rift is a problem is because scoring is relative if you just put it on a leaderboard. Is 300 million in Dodonpachi an amazing score? I actually think it's a very great score to get in Dodonpachi. The problem is that all this talented, dedicated Dodonpachi players out there are getting like 500 to 600 million. And so the dude who gets 300 million, it feels like you're a loser, but you're not. It's actually a really good score. But if the developer starts putting recognition formally into the game, where you get 300 million and the game goes, good job, that was actually a great effort, you're in the top percentile here, that matters. That is meaningful. That is why people care about ranks in Devil May Cry and ranks in games that do this type of thing, because the developer acknowledging the meta and skill of the player is a very powerful motivating tool, and a consistent one that the developer can count on. The developer, Danbo, cannot count on having world-class level players playing his game and competing. They are, but that's not something you can totally count on. And then as time goes on, these players disappear or do other things. But you can count on built-in medals of your game saying, hey, get this score. And in fact, one critique that I have, though it's not a harsh critique because I like the direction he's going in, is simply he could have kept developing this where you get this score and then he could have a secondary super player scoring requirement. I don't think that exists, but that would be really awesome and something that could further develop along Because right now the problem with scoring systems in Shmups is you could have the greatest scoring system of all time in your game, but if people aren't playing it and competing for it on leaderboards, it kind of really doesn't matter all that much. And there's only so far you can push scoring into the survival gameplay. That's fun, but the problem with that is you just metagame that like I do when I play Gorega. So that's not really a totally viable solution either. But one really valuable tool that developers can use, that Danbo uses here, is formal goals of scoring and survival in your game. It sounds simple, but it's actually crazy how powerful and underused this tool is. And a very tangible example of this is you go into the game's mission system, which is really fun and I recommend playing through it, is if you just play mission 1 for survival, super easy. I beat it the very first time. But it turns out he put a quite stiff scoring requirement in there, at least at my level. And I spent a ton of time and effort trying to get that scoring requirement during the course of this review. And I never did. I was able to get it on the next mission with the boss breaks. But that mission and that scoring requirement, again, had me digging into the design of the game in a way I never would have if I was just playing in practice mode or I was just playing for 1cc's. Another key feature of this game that I want to see as a standard across future shmups is its legibility menu. This is the type of thing I did not know I needed until Danbo gave it to me, but now that I have it, I want to see it all the time, which is the legibility where you're able to go in and you're able to change the visual appearance of the game, where it makes it more visual if you need to see more visuals, but also you can customize it in really cool ways. So the first one that I turned on that I'm like, all right, I'm keeping this on, is the player bullet visibility, where you can make the player bullets transparent. I actually wish there was a way to make them like 50% transparent, but that transparency to the player bullets really helps me a lot. And it's the kind of thing where if you have really good vision and visual acuity, you want the player bullets on, that's great. But if you're having a little bit of eye strain and eye trouble, making them transparent is really useful. Same thing with the background brightness and saturation, where I really need my bullets to pop out because I don't have the best vision. And so I can really make those bullets stand out by dropping down the saturation and then the background. And then on top of that, he added in these custom bullet color options, which again, at first seems like, oh, that's just a cute little addition, a fun little bit of customization. And that's kind of how I thought about it for the first while. But what you can do is you can go into the screen options and apply a lot of these fun visual filters Danbo has provided. And yes, you know, one or two of them might be kind of for memes, but even the ones that are for memes, what's cool is because you have the legibility menu, you can combine these together in a really cool way. So you can go in and mess around with the background elements and then the bullet color elements and genuinely make a really cool looking different game to the standard way Blue Revolver looks. I spent hours tweaking with this, and I'll put it on screen here, the Mark custom color palette. There's just a lot of mileage with this type of thing. It's the way to interact with the game and add a lot of replayability in a kind of unexpected fashion, because we all know how much people love custom characters and how much custom character creators have given mileage to fighting games. Think of Tekken, think of Virtua Fighter. Like, that was a great idea to help players feel more connected to the game and give them some individual relationship with it. The problem with that in shmups is the characters in shmups, even if they're like humanoid, they're just these tiny little things, and they don't have that much personality because it's hard to give them personality from 100 miles in the air. But playing Double Action, I realized you can give shmups personality, but you give the entire visual field the custom character treatment. So instead of changing an individual sprite, you change the color palette, you change the filters. And so actually I think this could be a great idea moving forward, and something other shmups could expand on, where not only are you able to customize the bullets and have some cool filters added in and recolor the character sprites and the bosses and the backgrounds and even add in some separation there, I think that could be a whole new trend in shmups that I never realized was a possibility until playing Double Action. And then, of course, there's the added XP mode that I need to talk about. It's crazy. There's so much going on in this game. It's actually difficult to cover it all. But the XP range is a ton of fun. He brings in a whole new set of special weapons. But Danbo has like a fun off-kilter sense of humor, not only when you talk to him, but also in his actual game design. So the premise of XP mode, it seems like, is there's new weapons that is brought into this, but this is like a weird ROM-hacked version of Blue Revolver where nothing quite works as it should. The special weapons are a little bit funky, but it's actually a ton of fun and surprisingly challenging, where when you first start off playing it, when you're not playing for score, it seems like, oh, this is a beginner type of a range. But once you start playing for score, that actually builds the rank. And then you end up in like parallel mode tier of difficulty, sort of, though your ship is kind of OP if you play it correctly. But it's great. It has its own unique identity that lands somewhere in between parallel mode and hyper mode, but it's kind of intentionally weird in a playful sort of manner. It's very Danbo, and it's the type of a range I think only he could come up with, and it really stands out as a cool new addition to the game that I definitely recommend people should check out and play. One critique I have of it is simply that there is no replay system or online leaderboard. That is a bummer considering how fun the mode is to play, so I hope Danbo goes ahead and adds in a leaderboard and replays for XP mode in the future. But there's so much to talk about with Double Action, and it feels like I'm never going to fully capture all the cool stuff going on with this game. And that's why if you're a shmup fan, I think you need to play it and see for yourself. And if you are new to the genre or potentially interested in getting into shmups, I think Double Action is one of the best shmups to begin with. And now that it's so robust and well made and has so many features, I think it might be the best beginner shmup at this point. It's got everything. It's the entire package. That's what I love about Double Action. It has everything. I can't think of anything that's missing other than like some really nitpicky small details. And so I'm going to get into some small shmup hipster beret and turtleneck type of critiques, and then we'll call this a review. And so my biggest critique of Double Action, and again, it's not a deal breaker or anything like that, is the leaderboard combines together all the ship type and weapon types into one global pool. I think that is a bit of a problem because all of the different characters and ship types have their own balance and have their own scoring potential, which I think is good and is also reflected in the scoring challenges that Danbo gives in the ship selection. So that's all great. The only problem comes up in the leaderboard structure itself, because if you have, let's say, a high tier character and then you have a low tier character and weapon type, no matter how good you get in the world at the low tier character with a low tier weapon type, your high score won't be really that high up on the leaderboard because it's going to be credited out by higher tier characters. But this can all be very easily solved if you just have a ship filter system like Gunvein does, because what happens then is you can just focus on, okay, I'm going to get the world record with my ship with my weapon, right? And then you can even have a cool bit of variance in skill where if you want to be the best player of Blue Revolver overall, what you could do is go through and get world records on all the different characters and all the different types and like clear the leaderboard in that fashion. That would be a really cool way to engage with the game. But unfortunately, that isn't currently possible because the ship types are unfiltered. So that's kind of my biggest critique. Again, not a deal breaker, but something that if Danbo could figure out, I think would be great. My second critique is similar, and I've already mentioned it a bit earlier, which is I do really want the XP version of the game to have its own replay system and leaderboard, only because as fun as it is to maybe post scores online and replays on YouTube and stuff, that is not the best system in terms of discovery and immediacy. And in the end, a lot of players, myself included, aren't going to take the time and effort. And there's just a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty. But when you have it built into the game, then it's formal, then it's recognized, then it's reliable. You can see, oh, I have this high of a score. It's the best score. It's the 10th best score. I do want to see that extended to XP mode as well. And then finally, my last critique is such a little nitpick that it feels a little bit unfair, but I'm going to mention it anyway, which is Blue Revolver uses a lot of resources between your special weapons and your bombs and your extends. And sometimes when you're really deep in the thick of dodging and stuff and scoring, you sometimes lose track of, all right, how many special weapons do I have left? Like, how many bombs do I have left? And yes, that is shown to you in plenty of areas, like at the bottom of the screen and in the gadgets. But when you're in a really sticky dodging situation, one innovation that other shmups have started doing that I really appreciate is putting this information in like little indicators next to your ship. And these could be toggleable on or off. They don't have to be there by default, but if you go in and maybe toggle them on, it's kind of a newer addition, like I said, so it's not like a really big critique or anything, but once you have it, it is kind of cool to have. So I think that would be an excellent addition as well. But overall, I love Double Action. It is easily my game of the year. If there's one game that comes out this year that I recommend you pick up and buy and you will not regret it, it is
Double Action.
And I think Danbo, he pulled it off. He's worked on this for so long. Kind of a gamble in a lot of ways to spend so long working on an update, and if it's not good, it's like, was it all worth it? But it's clearly worth it here. It puts Blue Revolver into just the top tier echelon of shmups, in my opinion. I don't know how much harder I can recommend it, but I recommend it once again. And so if you enjoyed this review, definitely check out my review of Gunvein by Boghog, a fellow Western shmup developer breaking the Euroshmup curse. I love that game. And also, speaking of breaking the Euroshmup curse, I would say go ahead and check out an old podcast, talk show, videocast type of thing I did a while back with Boghog and Danbo, funnily enough. And we talk about avoiding Euroshmup design. I think it is a fantastic conversation. And if you can, if you enjoy the channel, please support me on Patreon. I'm a full-time YouTuber now, and Patreon is really what makes this channel happen, so I'd appreciate support if you can. And Shmup Slam 7 is happening May 18th and 19th. I'll have the official announcement posted up here soon, but there you go, real quick. Thanks so much. Adios, everyone.
So thank you to the $5 patrons, 100, Absconditis, Accepting Panda, Anhold, AJA, Alistair Stevenson, Alexander Pfeiffer, Anthony A, Arcade Hell, Arrow Viper, Au Ally, Autoname, Battle Mode, Beam Pit, Bo, Ben Foster, Beetle Dames, Blade Symphony, Boghog, Board Bismati, Borgie22, Chad Memphis, Chase Palumbo, Jay Phillip, Christopher R, Chronic Burnout 3, Clara Cliff, Clay Binkley, Blimey Coyote, Coast, Cooksan666, Cook Some Soup, CSP 3900, Des Audio, DRK, Dan Matei, Dances with Incels, Darren Griffin, Dave Hansen, David Aldress, David Crespo, Dead Idun, Demian Smirnov, Desolis, Dimension Diver, Dingo, Dio Domke, Dio, DJ 420 Praise It, Drano, Dr. Bosky, Duckies, Eduardo, Edvard, Elvin, Senesev, Eleanor Moon, Eliza Alonso, Eric Houdini, Eddie Zerker, Explosive General Games, Falcus, Fenich, Fiskin, Florida Sucks, Forbidden Dave, Frames Per Human, Francisco, Freckle Lord, Full Set, Game Soup, Game Boy Gru, Gojira Green, GPM, Gustavo Sanchez, Hans Kowalski, Hausu, Hero Death, Hikihime, Han Harthy, Hud, Hugh Mungus, Jake Ryan, Jack Walsh, Jacob Grossman, Jacob Valenzuela, Jay McCarthy, J67, J Lab, JBRPG, Jimmy Striggins, Jake Hans, JMD, John Kelly, John Longwalker, John Simpson, Josaka, Josh Mayer, Julian Elwood, Jurgen, K, K2, Kane Evans, Ken 1082, Kill All Music, Kiskin, Kiss Kissian, Contain, Praise the Boys, Lingoblian, Ludwa, Roberta, Lord Harrington, Lorian, Mad Combaticus, Malaise, Mario Simic, Mark Sloan, Mars Bar, Master Zeon, Matt O'Leary, Matthew Woodford, Maz, Mekaroka, Minong, Meester, Metal Slime Drummer, New Jam, Michael De Polito, Michael McCord, My Liddy, Mike Mel, Milo Chamel, Mr. Mamma Mia, Mitwid, Morog, Monroe, Miles P, Mishkin, Nathaniel Davis, NCR Trooper Scout, Nico Perro, Neon Dagger Games, Nervous J, Ogre Mode, Oakland Kugels, Patrick Baseman, Paul Jablonski, Paul Osterman, Powell Perot, Pedro Perez, Philip Plus, PLP, Poor Little Pigeon, Poorly Written Protagonist, PRK, Psycho Blizzard, Queen Charlene, Quinlan Yeager, R2 Sinus, Ralph Trujillo, Raul, Rapido, RC, Real Scheme, Brent Holtz Time, Retrojet, Retro Man, Retro Schmupper, Riff Mason, Rip the Jacker, Robert Chang, Rory Starks, Wolf015, Salmon Connections, Sam, San Nevo, Zarn, Scanline City, Seymour, Segfault, Shader Bunny, Jantech, Jazzy, Shift D, Shmup Junkie, Shmup Run, Zero Pong, Social Kid, Spiders STG, Spongy, Steady AI, Stephen Bridges, Stepleable, Steve Fiction, Street Magic, Superfunk, Swoop, Kamzarian, Taze Ryu, The Boot Rex, The Dirty Screech, The N1, The Old Bensta, Thon McCarthy, Tim French, TK Productions, Travis Arbon, Troop Good Guy, Tsugumo, Duram, 2YU, Twist Please, Twilight EX, Tyler Olu, Unicorn Roots, Ursula, Ushimushi, Vic Viper, Beautiful, Rena, Vulgarity, Wabby Legs, What Is This, Your Nerdy Joe, Zachary Patton, Zeal, and Zenryoku.